Our topic at this time is entitled, Watch America, Her Ominous Role in End Time Events. I now introduce you to the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation. Heretofore, we've already given a lecture on that, and this chapter is perhaps the most absorbing exposition or prediction of end time events in all the Bible. It brings to view two beasts. One rises out of the sea, the other out of the earth. And the first beast, as I showed in the previous lecture, is a symbolism of papal Rome. This has been generally understood down through the centuries. There are 15 clear-cut marks of identification of this first beast, and all perfectly fit the papacy, the papal power. Now notice, we say that not because we are anti-Catholic, because this is dealing with a system. It's not dealing with individual Catholics. We love Roman Catholics like anyone else. There are some beautiful people in the Catholic faith, and Scripture shows that God has his people in the Catholic fold and that he's calling them out. So this is not anti-Catholic as such, but it is an exposition, and it brings to view the Roman Catholic organization. You might like to say the Vatican, which is a little bit different from the average Roman Catholic, you see. And the 15 specifications perfectly fit the papal power and no one else in history. And so there it is. Now in verses 1 to 4 we have the introduction and summary of the whole chapter. This is normal in regard to Scripture. It's an overall view of the rise, reign, ruin and restoration of the papacy. All in this chapter. In verses 5 to 8 is the reign of the papacy. 9 to 10, the ruin of the papacy, which in verse 3 is spoken of as the deadly wound that's given to it, you see. Then it speaks of its restoration, verses 11 and 12. Then the method of restoration, and finally the medium of restoration. And it indicates also that the restoration will be brought about by another power, another beast, another kingdom that rises this time out of the earth, not out of the sea, like the papal beast, you see. So, what power restores the supremacy of the papacy in our present world? Here we have the introduction, verses 9 to 12. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. What's this talking about? Well, let's finish the scripture. It says, and I beheld another beast. At the time when this captivity takes place, he beholds this another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And now notice what this power does. He exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes or compels the earth, and them that dwell therein, to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now there's the prediction, outlining the power that is to restore papal worship worldwide. So this is a tremendous prediction, you see. And there are altogether 10 points of identification by which we might be able to pick out the nation, the power that will be responsible for restoring papal worship on a worldwide scale. This is a tremendous prediction, you see. Now, the first point of identification is that it rises when the first beast receives its deadly wound. For at the time when captivity goes into captivity, speaking of the papacy, this beast is seen to rise. And we find, my friends, that in 1798, the papacy received a deadly wound. The papal power was abolished by the order of the French revolutionary government. The Pope was taken captive and died in captivity. And that's when was fulfilled. He that goes into captivity, he that leads into captivity, and the papacy had led thousands into captivity prior to this. Finally, the Pope himself went into captivity. And it says, he that kills with the sword shall be killed with the sword. My friends, the one who defended the papacy throughout the centuries, the chief defender, was feudal France. And when the French Revolution took place, my friends, feudal France was killed, was destroyed in that terrible revolution. So at that time, then this other beast is seen emerging from the earth. So that's the first sign, first point of identification. The second point is that it rises in a sparsely populated area of the world, for it comes out of the earth, whereas the other beast, the papal beast, rises out of the sea. The sea is made of water, and waters in prophecy denote multitudes, nations and tongues, a thickly populated area of the world. But this beast rises out of the earth, the opposite to the sea, meaning a sparsely populated area of the earth. And my friends, this perfectly fits the United States of America. She rose in North America, a place where there are approximately 1 million Indians. And if you work it out, each Indian family occupied about 6.5 square miles of territory, a sparsely populated area, you see. And thirdly, it rises silently, like a plant growing up, meaning peacefully. It didn't rise through military conflict like the other nations of the world, but silently it grew like a plant, you see, out of its natural resources. And then it says, it's like a lamb, denoting it's youthful, you see. It's gentle, like a lamb. It's innocent. And it says it has 2 horns like a lamb. And these are symbols of its power. For us, in prophecy, a horn denotes power, you see. And these 2 symbols are Christ-like. They're like a lamb, you see. Christian. The next point, it's a non-Catholic power, because these 2 symbols are anti-Catholic. The papacy has been opposed to those 2 principles, which we will bring to view soon. And then the next one, it reaches world influence. World power does this nation that rises out of the earth. 8, after the healing of the wound of the papacy, it then enforces papal worship. It compels the world and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast of the papacy. That's the 8th identification mark. 9, it promotes the formation of what is called an image to the beast, verse 14, and enforces the worship of that image. 10, the form of worship will be that of a mark, which is called the mark of the beast, and all mankind will be compelled to receive that mark, you see. So there are 10 points, and my friends, they fit only one power, and that power is the United States of America. So far, 7 of these specifications have been fulfilled, 7 of them, and the ground is now being prepared for the final 3 points. We're living, my friends, in the end time of the world's history. And so let's now review these points. It rises about 1798, according to verse 11, when the Pope went into captivity, when the papacy's chief defender, feudal France, the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church, as she was called, was destroyed in the French Revolution. At that time, you see, that was about 1798, when the papal wound was dealt by revolutionary France. And the American Declaration of Independence, when she began as a nation, when she became an independent power, was in 1776, 23 years prior to the French Revolution. You see that? And at the time of the French Revolution, my friends, and the dealing of the deadly wound, America was rising into power as a separate nation, you see. So that's the first point. The second point, it rises in a new area of the world, out of the earth, a sparsely populated area, whereas the other one rose from the sea, you see, a densely populated area. And as I said before, North America contained about 1 million Indians, over an area of 3 million square miles, of about 6 square miles per family. And at that time, 1798, there were 3 million people in 13 states. That's of European people. 3 million in 13 states, a very sparsely populated area of the world. So that's the second point. The third point, it rises silently, peacefully, like a plant. That word coming up in the Greek is anabinon, it means to grow up like a plant. And to grow up peacefully like a plant, not by military conquest, but by peaceful migration, by the development of her natural resources. That's how America became a great power, you see. And historians have confirmed this fact, my friends, that she grew up like a plant. For instance, G.A. Townsend, in his work entitled The New World Compared with the Old, page 635, this is what he says: like a silent seed we grew into empire. Remarkable, confirming this prediction, you see. A prominent writer in the Dublin Nation said, quote, "The USA, a wonderful empire which was emerging amid the silence of the earth, daily adding to its power and pride." Very significant language, you see, in the light of this prediction. Edward Everett, an orator, way back in 1824, is recorded in Orations and Speeches. Notice his remark at Plymouth in 1824. He says, "Behold the mighty regions over which in peaceful conquest, Victoria sine claude," meaning victory without strife, "they have borne the banners of the cross," referring to the pioneers of the American nation, you see. So there is the fulfillment of that point. And the fourth point, it possesses 2 lamb-like features. As I said before, a horn is a symbol of power, according to Deuteronomy 33, verse 17. And these 2 lamb-like features, this power would possess 2 horns like a lamb. The word lamb, my friends, in the book of Revelation is mentioned 29 times, and every time it refers to Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. So this means that this nation would have 2 features or symbols of power which are Christ-like, which are Christian. Now, did Jesus Christ lay down any principle in regard to the government of men? Any principle for the well-being of society? My friends, we find that in the Gospels he laid down 2 principles. And I want you to notice what they are. The first one is brought to you in St. Luke chapter 20, verse 25. And this is what Jesus said. He said, "Render to Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and render to God the things that belong to God." Now there is stated a very important principle. Give Caesar, that represents the state, the civil power, give that which belongs to Caesar, and give what belongs to God to God. Don't mix them. Don't give to Caesar the things of God, the things that pertain to religion, and don't give to God the things that belong to politics. Don't mix church and state. Keep politics out of religion and religion out of politics. That's the principle Jesus Christ laid down in the Gospels over 2,000 years ago. And let me tell you, friends, that great principle, the first time it was introduced into national government was when the United States wrote her statement of independence, her fundamental statement of independence. She wrote that into her Constitution. The first time in history that any nation had ever done it. And this tells us, my friends, how difficult it has been for mankind to learn the lesson of separation of church and state. Now, the second lamb-like principle that America possesses, and which was also laid down by Christ, is brought to view in the 12th chapter of St. John and verse 27. And now notice what he said. He says, if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. And that word judge means condemn. I condemn him not. For I came not to judge or condemn the world, but to save the world. Now there we have a mighty principle. And that principle is of religious liberty. If a man chooses not to believe, he's free to do it without interference, without condemnation. You see that? That terrific principle of religious liberty. That if a man chooses to not believe, not to agree, he's free to do it. And you know, my friends, it's taken mankind a long time to learn that important principle. The great majority of the blood that's been shed through history, my friends, has been the result of denying that principle, of trying to compel others to believe what you believe and practice what you practice. It's been a denial of religious liberty. And you know, when the American Constitution was written, that principle was written into that Constitution. The first time in history, in fulfillment of this tremendous prediction of Revelation chapter 13:11 onwards. So there we have that thing. Remember, Jesus also said in St. Matthew chapter 7 verse 1, he said, judge not, that you be not judged. Meaning, condemn not, that you be not condemned. And this is talking about the realm of religion. Freedom to believe what a man likes, or what he, or to disbelieve if he chooses, you see. And so there it is. And notice now the American Constitution, Article chapter 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. That is, separation of church and state, a republican form. Article 6, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Terrific principles written into that Constitution. And let me say, my friends, that those two principles have been the secret of America's greatness. And what a great nation she has been, my friends. Marvelous. And, a classic example of this is the fact is South America. South America has a tremendous population. She has natural resources, I guess, equal to that of North America. But she has not become great. Not like North America. And why? Because she has not practiced the two great principles of religious liberty and separation of church and state. That's the reason why, you see. When the Pilgrim Fathers sailed across the Atlantic from Europe, they sailed away, my friends, to obtain freedom. They determined that they'd have a church without an oppressive pope, that they'd have a state without an oppressive king. That's why they left Europe and came to America. And when you sail up that beautiful New York harbor, there you see the great Statue of Liberty with the torch of freedom held aloft. What a sight, what a thrill that is. And just imagine the thrill this was to the millions who came from oppressed Europe to America for freedom. And they certainly found it. Wonderful freedom. So there we have that, and a fulfillment, my friends, of this tremendous prediction given 2,000 years ago. You know, the Seventh-day Adventists about 250 years ago, when they studied this chapter, they came to the conclusion that the second beast represented America. And when they first began to teach it, they were laughed at, you see, laughed at. My friends, but no longer do we laugh at them, because there's no question. It's true. Their interpretation stands up. And the longer we go on, my friends, the more we find that the specifications are being fulfilled. Quite startling, almost frightening, you see, in view of what it predicts for the very near future. So now, let's come to the, and so in connection with this, they alone have discovered the interpretation of this great prediction. And time, my friends, has proved their accuracy in connection with this. Now, it's interesting to notice the conclusions of the great Wesleyan, the great Methodist John Wesley. In his New Testament notes, which he wrote in 1754, when he came to this chapter of the book of Revelation, this is what he said. After applying the first beast to the papacy, which was the general belief and has been for centuries, notice what he says about the second beast. He says, another beast, but he is not yet come, though he cannot be far off, for he is to appear at the end of the 42 months of the first beast. That means 1798. And he had two horns like a lamb, a mild, innocent appearance. Now he wrote that in 1754. And just a few years later, my friends, there emerged the United States of America in the New World, fulfilling this prediction of Revelation 13. Now, the sixth point of identification, it would be a non-Catholic power. Why? Because those two principles of separation of church and state and religious liberty are contrary to the principles of the Roman Catholic Church. Throughout her history, she's been opposed to religious liberty and opposed to separation of church and state in her published statements, my friends. Now, of course, it's true that in areas where there's freedom, she says she believes in freedom, you see. But, my friends, when she is the majority, we find freedom disappears, and that's what is ahead of us, you see. So those two principles are non-Catholic, anti-Catholic, indicating that this power that rises out of the earth will be a non-Catholic power. And, of course, from its very inception, the American nation has been a Protestant nation. You see, without question, a Protestant nation from its inception. Now, the seventh point, it gains worldwide influence and authority. And now we're coming down to our day. Notice what it says, verse 12. It causes, meaning it compels, the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now there is the next prediction. And my friends, the ground is now being prepared. It's almost prepared, ready for the fulfillment of this tremendous prediction. The earth, it says he compels the earth and them would worship therein. The earth there represents the world. Because in the previous verses where it speaks of the restoration of the papacy, it says all the world wondered after the beast, the papacy, verse 3. And in verse 8 it says, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life. Verse 8. You see that? All that dwell on the earth. So what this means is the United States, one day soon, my friends, is to compel the world to accept the worship of the papacy. What a prediction. I tell you what courage has took place to proclaim that way back in the 1860s. You see? But they proclaimed it to the Seventh-day Adventists. And time has proven that they were correct, you see. And so this is what is coming. It will enforce the worship of the beast. And notice it's after the healing of the wound. It compels the world and them that dwell therein to worship the beast whose deadly wound was healed. And the deadly wound, my friends, was healed. The wound that was delivered in 1798 when the papacy was abolished by order of the French government. Abolished. That was the delivering of the wound. And you know, we find that this deadly wound was the healing of it was officially performed in 1929 when Mussolini restored to the Catholic Church its political and civil power in the famous treaty called the Lateran Treaty, because it was in the Lateran Palace where it was signed. And it's interesting to notice that the Catholic authorities even class this, they describe it as a healing. For in the Catholic Advocate of 1929 it says, "A crowd tense with excitement is here to witness the passage of these two men, Mussolini and Cardinal Gaspari, whose pens will heal a wound of 59 years." Isn't that interesting? And remember when, in connection with the signing of this treaty, Mussolini had an avenue built from the city of Rome right down to the Vatican, the Avenue of Reconciliation, and probably many of you have walked down that very avenue to the Vatican. And so that was in 1929, my friends, and that is when the wound was healed, when the political power was delivered back to the Catholic Church, and since then she has been a political power, a kingdom in her own right, you see. As they said back there in 1929, the Pope is king again, and it was literally true, king again. And it's interesting to notice that the San Francisco Chronicle of February 12, 1929, in describing the signing of the Lateran Treaty, said this: "In affixing their autographs to the memorable document, healing the wound which festered since the 1700s, extreme cordiality was displayed on both sides." How about that? The healing of the wound, you see. And ever since, my friends, ever since 1929, the papal power has been growing throughout the world, silently growing, faster than the average person dreams, you see. So there's the 7th point. Now we come to the 8th point concerning the United States in prophecy. And that is, it enforces papal worship. It enforces it. This means that the USA is to become pro-Catholic. Is that fulfilling? It certainly is. Today, my friends, America in general is pro-Catholic. It is no longer anti-Catholic like it once was. And this means that America is going to turn from Protestant principles to Roman Catholic principles. It's going to enforce its worship. This means that the Constitution of the United States will either be bypassed or changed. And friends, the evidence is glaring today that she is bypassing the Constitution. Cleverly bypassing it through the courts, etc. They are bypassing the American Constitution. And it means that finally religious liberty in America will disappear. What a prediction. Will disappear. And the religious oppression will be legalized in that great land. What a sad prediction this is, my friends. The land of liberty that it's been, marvelously so. There are going to come dramatic changes, and friends, already those dramatic changes are taking place. You probably know as a result of the advent of terrorism, what's happened? the American government has brought in laws into force, my friends, that have taken away the personal liberty of the American people. And so few, it seems, realise it. But that's what's happened, you see. Now, it's interesting to notice, my friends, that Rome, the papacy, has planned to capture America for many, many years. Way back in the 1890s, she'd let it be known to her American people that her plan was to capture America. Did you know that? Listen, I read from the Centennial Conference of Catholics in Baltimore in 1890. And here speaking is Archbishop Ireland. And this is the statement that he made to his Catholic people. He said, "Catholics of the United States are called to make America Catholic. Catholic truth will travel on the wings of American influence and with it encircle the universe." How about that? That's from the Pope in the New Era, page 222 and 223, 1890. You see, this has been Rome's long-term plan concerning the United States. And again, 1894, 4 years later, in the Catholic Standard and Times. Notice the statement. It says, "The United States, it can be said without exaggeration, are the chief thought of Pope Leo XIII. A few days ago, on receiving an eminent American, Leo XIII said, quote, 'The United States of America are the future. We think of them incessantly. That is why Pope Leo XIII turns all his soul, full of ideality, to what is improperly called his American policy. It should be called his Catholic universal policy.'" How about that? You see, when was that? 1894. That has been the plan of Rome for many years back, to capture the United States. I come now to 1909, and here is a report of the Third Washington Conference of Roman Catholics. As stated in the Mission Movement in America, from the Catholic University, Washington, D.C., June 1909. And notice, "Our purpose is to make America dominantly Catholic." There's the plan. You see, repeated again and again. And today we're seeing the fulfillment of that plan. And in the Roman Catholic Missionary, published in Washington, D.C. in May 1910, notice, "It seems to me," says this writer, "that the main support of Protestantism comes from the USA and England. If we put an end to this effort in the USA and England by making these nations predominantly Catholic, we will have removed the chief obstacle to the conversion of the world to the true faith. A vigorous effort in the United States at this time will reduce the opposition to an insignificant condition." My friends, has that come true? Sadly, it has. Without question, that has come true, you see. Now, way back in the 1930s, I can recall this well, how there began, or there was instituted by the papacy, what was called Catholic Action. We don't hear of it now. This was to gain a special movement on the part of Rome to gain favour for the Roman Catholics. In a quiet, wisely planned way, they were to appeal to the non-Catholic world. And how remarkably successful that campaign was. It's interesting to notice the words of Dr. E. Boyd Barrett, for many years a Jesuit. And in 1935, he wrote in his work called Rome Stoops to Conquer, November 4, 1936. This is what he said, and how true it is. He says, it's speaking of the Catholic action. He says, in theory, Catholic action is the work and service of lay Catholics in the cause of religion under the guidance of the bishops. In practice, it is the Catholic group fighting their way to control America. And not only America, my friends, but other countries too. The effort, the fight, may be drawn out. It may last for 5 or 10 years, even if it lasts for 20. What is 20 years in the life of Rome? The fight must be fought to a finish. Opposition must be worn down if it cannot be swept away. Rome's immortal destiny hangs on the outcome. That destiny overshadows the land. And in the fight, as she has ever fought when battles were most desperate in the past, Rome will use steel and gold and silvery lies. Rome will stoop to conquer. And there it is from one of our own scholars. And how true it has been, my friends. How true it has been fulfilled. In 1936, there came from the Vatican, in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, November 1936, this statement. Notice what it says. Pope Pius feels that the United States is the ideal base for Catholicism's great drive. What drive? The drive, my friends, to encircle the world with Catholic influence, etc. The Catholic movement, Rome's militant organization numbering millions all over the world, will be marshalled direct from Rome by Monsignor Pizzardo. Next to Pacelli, the Holy See's shrewdest diplomat and politician. That was published in 1936. So you see the plan, or the plans, my friends. There it is. And we find that Rome planned 5 steps in the capture of the United States as well as other countries. Notice what the 5 steps were, and you'll surely recognize how they've been fulfilled. The first one was to Catholicize school textbooks of the public schools. Has that happened? It surely has. Second, to revise the books of reference. Has that happened? It surely has. Third, to muzzle or control the public press or media. Has that happened? It surely has. 4, to capture or control the public libraries. Has that happened? It surely has. 5, to censor books that are not friendly to the Roman Catholic Church. Fulfilled? Absolutely. They have been fulfilled, my friends. And notice this admission by Cardinal Baudrillard. He was director of the Catholic Institute of France. And in his work entitled The Catholic Church, the Renaissance and Protestantism, page 103 onwards, this is what he says. Indeed, first of all, a very frank statement concerning the many persecutions of the Catholic Church, and admits it. He admits it, you see. And then he says, indeed, even among our friends and our brothers, we find those who dare not look this problem in the face. That is the problem of Rome's dark and awful past, of her slaughter of millions of martyrs who were dissenters from Catholicism. He says, we find those who dare not look this problem in the face. They ask permission from the Church to ignore or even to deny all those acts and institutions in the past that have made Catholicism compulsory. You see that? Now there's the admission of a leading light, a leading scholar of the papacy. And now I want you to notice, here is a declaration by an American senator before the Senate in 1928, where he makes the statement how Rome's effort has succeeded. And this is what he says. Thomas E. Watson, in 1928, before the United States Senate, quote, in the public schools, the Catholics have stealthily introduced textbooks written by Jesuits. And your children are being taught that the Roman Church was misunderstood in the past, that its doctrines are not fatal to humanity and gospel religion, that its record is not saturated with the blood of innocent millions murdered by papal persecutors, and that there never was such a monstrosity as the alleged sale of papal pardons of sins, unquote. And again, he says, educate youth in this Catholic way, and the consequences are logical. And that's on the records, my friends, of the United States Senate. You see that? And this explains, my friends, the changed outlook on Rome in the United States today. There has been a complete change, and not only in the USA, in most other parts of the world. Rome is now popular with the masses, in great favour. She's accepted now as a Christian church, where for centuries she was looked upon as the great Antichrist because she fulfilled all the specifications of the great Antichrist, you see. But not so today. What a contrast, my friends. Today she's the largest single church in the USA. She outstrips the financial income from the USA to the Vatican, outstrips all others combined in the world. The Vatican is now the greatest multinational in USA, and not only USA, my friends, in the world. That may shock you, but that's a proven fact. She is in control of United States finance, believe it or not. Americans are blind to the character and the aims of Rome. Rome has been mightily successful in her plans to capture the United States. And it's been said now for some time that America is now in a post-Protestant era, which is totally correct. Post-Protestant era, you see. And friends, this prediction of Revelation 13, 11 to 17, this was proclaimed by the Seventh-day Adventists way back in the 1860s. And they've had no reason to alter it one iota. Remarkable. Time has confirmed their interpretation. And so, my friends, the ground is prepared for the final events that are to come to pass. And these final events will be presented in our next lecture, which is entitled When Religious Persecution Returns. My dear friends, I invite you to look into this tremendous prediction, to learn the truth about it, and also to learn what to do in the light of it, because we are given special instruction what to do in the great crisis that's coming. And let me tell you, there's a crisis coming, my friends, that the world little dreams about. And every man is going to be brought to the place where he's got to make a decision for truth or for error, for Jesus Christ or Antichrist. And whether you want to be or not, you are going to be involved as well as me. Every one of us. And so we need to look into this. May God help you to determine to look into it, to find the truth, that you might be ready. For remember, he that is forewarned is forearmed. And may that be your experience, is my very earnest prayer.